So now we're going to look at some examples of where culture can get in the way, can cause some problems between Westerners and Chinese people, especially at schools. All of these cases are based around problems that you might have at school to help you understand how those problems we were just talking about can really rear their ugly heads. I'll talk through each of them and then raise some questions that you can consider. So you might want to think about pausing the video at those points. And then afterwards, I will give you kind of my analysis. All of these are based on experiences that people like myself have had in China at school. So the first one we're going to look at is the holiday. So it's Friday and September is coming to an end. It's the end of your first month at your school. You've planned a trip to somewhere else in China or perhaps in Southeast Asia. You've booked the tickets and you're waiting at the airport for your flight. However, whilst you're waiting at the airport, you get a call from your school to say that you've got classes tomorrow. Obviously, you're upset. Nobody told you. So what went wrong here? What should you do now? What could you have done differently? Who is to blame, perhaps? So if you want some time to consider this, I suggest pressing pause now. I'm going to go on. So here we have an example of a calendar. Now it does actually match the calendar for later this year, but it isn't exactly the same. So this might be from a previous year. What you've got here is 7 days of vacation marked out in orange, starting on Sunday, because Sunday is the 1st of October. There's a tradition in China whenever there's any kind of national holiday, like the October 1st National Day holiday, that holiday and any days off that would be associated with it should start on the actual day of the National Day holiday. That is the 1st of October. This will happen throughout the year with other holidays that you might have. Now, National Day holiday, the government promises everybody at least 7 days off in a row. Whether they're weekend or weekdays, it's going to be 7 days off in a row. And in order to do this, they have to move school days and work days around. Now, in actual fact, the National Day holiday only has 3 days which are holidays, which are days off that everybody gets. And these are here, the 2nd to the 4th in this example. The 1st could be a day off, but really it's a weekend, so it's a day off anyway. The 7th, the same. Now, in order to get you your 7 days off in a row, you need these 2 days here, the 5th and the 6th of October. In order to get those days off, 2 days need to be stolen or adjusted from somewhere else. In this case, the 30th and the 8th. So you'd have a 6-day working week here, 7 days of holiday, and a 6-day working week here. So in this example, what went wrong is that the teacher assumed this would be their last day, the 29th of September. They'd have a weekend here, and they go into the National Day holiday for starting on the 1st, no problems. So I can book my flight out on Friday night or on Saturday morning, no problems. But they didn't think to check, and perhaps whatever company they were working for obviously didn't tell them, their school didn't tell them either. Because everybody thought, oh, well, everybody knows that. It's something that everybody knows. And quite often they don't think of the foreigners. They don't anticipate that. They're very busy doing lots of other things. They're very busy marking papers. They're very busy setting homework for the holiday, etc., etc. And perhaps no one is specifically responsible for telling that person. Now, the result is that the school is probably upset that this teacher has missed their class, and someone's going to have to cover that class. Now, the foreign teacher in this situation may say, well, the responsibility for letting me know about this lies with the school, or it lies with somebody else. It's not my responsibility. However, the best possible solution in this situation is for this to not happen in the first place. And the way to avoid that in China is to try to know everything, is to try to find everything out. So make yourself open to receiving communication, get in contact with everybody at your school, find out who sets the timetables, talk to other teachers at other schools, because these holidays are the same for everybody throughout the public school system, and that means quite likely throughout the private school system as well. So what went wrong? Essentially what we're saying here is communication with the school. Now, we can put the responsibility for that at the door of the school and we can try to blame them. But what we do at SDE is we say, we're the ones who are going to improve communication. We're the ones who are going to raise the level. So people like myself, the specialists, the academic consultants, we're the ones who are going to get in touch with you, try and make sure that you know these things and you're ready for them, and also encourage you to communicate with other people. Talk to other teachers, talk to the teachers at your school, make sure that you know what's going on, why it's happening, and you're ready and prepared to make the allowances in that respect. What to do now? Well, in this situation, there's probably not a lot you can do. The school would probably be understanding and accept you've booked your flights and you know that they do have a certain amount of responsibility. So perhaps seek ways to make it up to the school and to the teachers. Perhaps when you come back from your holiday, you'd be able to cover classes for the teachers who've covered your classes on that Saturday. And that's a really good bit of advice in general. So when things do go wrong, when perhaps it might be perceived that you have made a mistake or you've caused trouble for other people, even though it may not seem that they're complaining or that they're upset about it, it's always worth trying to make amends, trying to make it up to people, trying to offer to do something to make the situation better, to make up for any trouble that you may have caused. Whether you intended to do it or not, it just goes down really, really well and can really help at your school. Because at the end of the day, at SDE, what we're doing is we're all working together to try to provide a really good service to the schools. It's not just about giving people an opportunity to teach in China. It's about going to the schools, teaching the students, giving them something great, and also giving the schools a great contribution as well. So the next one is the event. This starts one morning when a colleague tells you that they need you to help them with an event that afternoon, perhaps not very specific about the details. You already have plans to help another teacher in the afternoon and you politely excuse yourself. Your colleague's confused, and next day you get the cold shoulder from a more senior member of staff, the dean perhaps of the English department. So obviously you're confused. What went wrong here? What might you have done differently? Okay, now I give you a chance to pause before I go into analysing this problem. So what went wrong? The event may have been important to the dean. They may have asked the colleague who came to you and asked you for help to go and get your help with the event. In this kind of situation, it might be assumed that you would just say yes, because most other teachers at the school would say yes. Therefore, no one really anticipated that you wouldn't agree to help. Also, it's worth pointing out that people won't always try really hard to convince you to do things. So, as a Westerner in the Chinese school, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking that, everybody else here has a set of lungs and a mouth and vocal cords. They can ask questions. They can push me to do things. That's what I would do in a situation. If I needed someone to do something, well, I just keep asking them until they said yes. You've got to remember that's not really part of the culture here. People don't like confrontations. And also maybe their expectation is that, you're going to help in some way. So, why would they have to try really hard to get you to help? And it's also worth noting that they're talking to you in their second language. They're perhaps not very confident of coming to you and asking you for help. So, how can we improve the situation? I really would encourage you, when anyone is asking you for help with anything, is try to understand what it is that they want help with. Try to understand who's involved, what's it for, how important is it, what are the consequences of you saying no? You really want to know what the consequences of you refusing to do something are before you refuse to do it. Because remember, you're at a school, to help the students, to make a good contribution there. Not only is there an opportunity that you'll learn something new and you'll get a great, interesting opportunity out of it, but you also got an opportunity to help the students and help the teachers and then really improve your service to the school in that way. So basically, miss no opportunity to be helpful and to show that you're always willing to contribute, collaborate, and participate in what the school is trying to do. Next example is a crying student. So you have a student who is disrupting a class and you give them a talking to. The result is, unsurprisingly, giving the title, that the student bursts into tears, leaves the class for lunch at the end of your lesson, still crying. Later in the day, you're confronted about having hit the student, something that obviously didn't happen. So what went wrong? And what should you do now? Again, you could pause now if you want to think about it and analyze the case before I move on. Okay. So what went wrong here? It's quite likely, and this is a real life case that we had last year, that the parents or the teachers spoke to the student. Perhaps this was quite a young student, maybe grade 2 or grade 3, and the student then said, "Oh yeah, the teacher hit me." Or maybe the parents asked and they said, "Oh, did the teacher hit you?" And it's possible that the student misheard them, or they said yes because they felt really bad about what had happened, and it's not beyond the realms of possibility. Now, given what the student may have said in that situation, the parents or the teachers will likely then report that to a leader at the school, and the leader has no option then to take some kind of action. And at the very least, someone needs to come to you and talk to you about it. And it might be that when they come to you, that they perhaps make an accusation, or they perhaps ask a very direct question like, why did you hit the student? Or they make a statement like, you shouldn't hit students. And you'll of course be offended and shocked because you'll feel like you're being accused of something that you clearly haven't done. So what should you do if that happens? Well, this is a little bit like the previous example about the event. Before you go guns blazing, defending yourself and lose your temper, it's best to think about, okay, what could possibly have happened here? You know you didn't hit the student, and you don't believe that the person who's talking to you is lying or doesn't perhaps believe what they're saying. So it's always best in this situation to try to understand where they're coming from. So always adopt a more patient attitude if you possibly can, and respond to someone in this situation and say, I didn't hit the student. First make that clear, and then talk to the teacher, talk to the contact teacher, get in touch with your specialist or someone like me and say, hey, this is what's going on. I don't understand. I'm not comfortable with the situation. What should I do? And my advice is always going to be, try to explain to them what happened. Try to understand why they might be accusing you of doing something that you haven't done, and help them to understand why that simply isn't what happened, and that, they need to give you the benefit of the doubt. The more patient you are in this situation, the easier it's going to be for people to accept your argument. Unfortunately, what can happen in situations like this is that a teacher will lose their temper and shout and scream perhaps, or behave in what might be viewed as a very unacceptable manner for a teacher. And that's really important in China. The content of what you're saying might not be important as the way that you're saying it in that situation. So if you give over a sense that you are an unreasonable, angry, reactionary person, then that may be the perception of you. Whether it's right or wrong, whether it's fair or not, that may be the perception that the school gets. And once that's happened and you've really lost your temper, it may not matter whether or not you actually hurt a student or not. There is now this negative perception of you, and it'd be very difficult for you to get back from that. So that's why it's really important to make this example. So just to re-emphasize, remain calm and patient, explain what happened, seek our help, count to 10. Just remember, you know what's right, you know what you did, you know what really happened. And just think about in a day or two when the school will understand everything and will accept that there was a misunderstanding, and that sometimes perhaps students don't always tell the truth. Our next example is a schedule change. So you arrive to school late as you don't have class in the morning at the first period, and your school seems to be reasonably tolerant about that. However, your contact teacher asks where you were and says she's been trying to call you all morning. Your schedule was changed and you have a class in the first period, but of course you've missed it now because you've come in for the second period. So what went wrong here? What could you have done differently? Again, you can pause now before I go into a bit of analysis. So what went wrong? Well, we spoke about Chinese culture being more polychromatic, so there might be changes to the schedule, and the communication at your school might not be instantaneous, and you might not hear about things immediately when you need to. Or there might be a note in Chinese left on your desk, despite the fact that everybody knows you can't read Chinese. These are the sorts of things that can genuinely happen, do happen. Of course, you missed your class, and it's understandable that you would do that if no one had informed you about it, but perhaps it was your responsibility to know whether or not there was a class change. So what could you have done differently? Just as I've said, be open to the possibility that the communication is not always instantaneous, that these changes happen all the time. So you need to be ready and available when the school needs you. So try to strengthen your relationships with the teachers at the schools so that your communication with them is really strong. If you're struggling with that, you can always just make sure that you're available at the school whenever they might need you, just in case there is a schedule change. I was lucky in that I lived very close to my school, and if I was ever out of the school and there was any last minute change or I was needed at the school, I could be there within about 5 minutes. So just be aware of this, make yourself available by phone, by WeChat, emphasize the fact that you're there whenever they need you. So that sums up our session on cultural challenges in China. And up next will be the Foreign Teachers Code of Conduct.